Right, Monday morning again, believe it or not. Fantastic. Good morning. Welcome. As most of us, I think, here know, we have been going flat out for the last 3 days on the Virtual Trade Fair at Africa. It's been absolutely amazing. We've had 21 speakers over the 3 days so far, another 8 sessions to come this morning, plus a couple of general chats. So it's been absolutely pumping. It's been quite phenomenal, and we've been pushing wisdom's chats on these sessions and inviting people. So I really hope once the fair is over, we're going to get some new folk coming on board with us here and getting involved. But it's exciting stuff, and I think all of us have been quite blown away by the process. So that just tells you where we're at. That's Trevor, me, and Jasper. Lee was also one of our speakers, and so it's all been go. So don't ask me where we are today, and I'm also not sure whether I'm Arthur or Martha like Trevor this morning. But Lee, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick us off and take us through the session today.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's good to gather. It does become a kind of grounding place. It becomes just part of your life, doesn't it? This when you become something that you've established now over 80, 90 days. So it just is part of the routine. And today is leadership. So what is it that we expect, or what is it that we would hope leaders would do, no matter where you are in society, whether that's within your family, within your community, within business, within social structures, political structures. What is it that we want leaders to act? How do we want them to act? What do we want them to say? What do we want them, how do we want them to show up? That would help us to understand what good leadership is. And I want to start with 2 stories. The one is one on LinkedIn, and you may have seen it. There's a little video. It's one of those shooting from your car, watching wildlife videos. And they happen to have spotted a bear, a big black bear, sort of just going down the road, plod, right in front of them. And the bear spots a red traffic cone that's fallen on its side. And it goes up, takes the cone in its mouth, tips it back up, and then keeps plodding back on the road. And I thought, well, that is really what leadership is about. I see the problem, I fix it, and I walk on, not waiting for applause or any acknowledgement. I deal with what I see is in front of me and make the world a better place because of it. So I thought that was just a bear being a role model. We could talk, anybody and everything can be a role model. And then the second story that I want to share is because I thought leadership is more than just taking initiative, solving problems and getting on with the business. It also has something to do with communication. It has something to do with connecting with other people to bring other people along on a journey. And at the beginning of COVID, before it really was even a thing in South Africa, and it was sort of starting to build momentum, and we were seeing terrible things happening in Italy and Spain, I wrote a blog saying, let me just see what the title is, A Leader in Time of Crisis. And really it was me searching for where is leadership, where are the leaders we need to take us through this time of crisis. And so I went back in history, and I literally Googled best leaders in crisis. And this amazing person came up. His name is Kenneth Cheneau. He is one of the first Black CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. That was the American Express company. He was CEO from 2001 to 2018, and he was named chairman and CEO 5 months before 9/11 happened. So he served 2001 to 2018. So he saw 9/11, and American Express's head office was opposite the Twin Towers when 9/11 happened. So not only was it damaged, but they had to relocate 4,000 workers from that office while they were rebuilding it. And then he also saw the Great Recession happening in 2018. And so in an interview, these were some of his words. He says, you have to understand the feelings people have in a crisis, the uncertainty they feel, the anxiety they have. And you have to acknowledge to them that this is indeed frightening. But you also have to explain that there are good reasons why they should also feel confident. He goes on to explain, prior to any crisis, you have to have built integrity, which I think is the foundation of leadership. I say that because I can give you the most rational strategy, and you might say, well, wait a minute, 9/11, the downturn, and you're telling me we're going to be fine? In a crisis, with even the most rational strategy, there has to be trust. It has to be there, because how else can people believe in the strategy or in leadership unless they've seen consistency? People are also looking for courage. I define courage in this context as a willingness to make tough calls, to speak up about issues, and they also look for compassion. Does the leader care about me? And then lastly, he said, what's more, you have to be absolutely decisive. And that means you may bruise some feelings, but you've got to risk people being upset with you because you have to take action. So I thought that was a really good summary of what it takes to be a leader in crisis, but actually at any time, is understanding the feelings of your people, having compassion for them, but at the same time making the tough calls and having courage to make take decisive action, even though it might upset some people. So that's my way of entering into the subject and hopefully stimulating some thoughts and ideas. And so over to you. Thanks, Ivan.
Great, thanks, Lee. Yeah, that was a lot of things to think about, and a lot of ideas that came through from that. So very, very interesting stuff. So Mpulela, let's go to you first.
Morning again. I think Lee has taken all the points. I closed shop this morning and call it a morning. Yeah, I think from what you read there, part of what I had here as what for me a leader should be like has been covered largely by what you say. But I can start by saying that for me, a leader should have self-mastery, meaning they should be able to lead themselves before they can lead others. You know, it talks to self-discipline. It talks to one being able to regulate their own emotions. It speaks to a leader being able to manage their own affairs, whether it is financial, whether it is their family, and so forth. And the reason why, for me, a leader needs self-mastery is that he needs to lead by example. And so it's very difficult, if you don't have those qualities, to then show by example what you want people to be like. I've actually written here that a leader must not ask for what they are not willing to do themselves, as a line. The next one is that a leader should be visionary. And for me, Vision is not a vision unless it is for the benefit of the people. In actual fact, that's how I check whether my vision is, for lack of a better word, godly. It's never given to a person for their own benefit and for their own grandeur or for their own. It's given so that a people can benefit. And when a vision is people oriented, it's an easy sell because people can see themselves in that vision. They can see how they have a part to play, but also a part to benefit in that. All right. A leader must have a righteous conviction of their faith or what they believe in. What I mean by that is once they have values and they have a vision, they must believe in that vision, even when it feels like things are derailing, but they hold on to what they believe is right to do at that time. I'm going to end with this one. I've got a couple of them. A leader must have courage. The difficult times are going to require courage. Courage is what is needed to save a nation, literally. A leader must have perseverance because they will be tested. Last but not least, let me end it with this one, probably one of the tougher ones. A leader must be humble. It is the only way he can be others-oriented. Pride leads only to self-centeredness. It's very difficult to have pride and have the ability to think of others. So that's why a leader must be humble. Let me keep it there for today.
Great, thanks, Mpolelo. And I think between you and Lee, we've been well led. So I think your point at the start of your chat, but no, just jokes aside, again, absolutely fantastic input. So yeah, thanks very much for that. So Kevin, let's come across to you.
Okay, well, I don't think I'm going to go into such depth as Mpolelo and Lee have done. I'm thinking of leadership. I think of two words really. They come out. Leadership with people now. I'm thinking about carrot and stick as being the two types of leadership you can easily come across. And then if you put that into a context of business, leading a team or leading a force within a business, you can either be the type of leader that takes all the credit for the people or give the credit back to the people that have achieved it. And you know, I certainly know which one gets the best results. It's not rocket science. If you can support your people, your team, and help build them by leadership, you're going to get much better results than cracking the whip, so to speak. That's my take. I'd like to keep it as that, nice and simple this morning.
Great, thanks, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and I think it comes down to you know, different forms of motivation and how we do motivate, and can we in fact motivate people. So I think that's probably another topic for another discussion, but it all ties in one way or another. So Jesper, let's get across to you.
I'm happy you started with Lee and Mpumelelo, and also what Kevin added there, because then I don't have to say anything. It was all covered. But I think more than trying to add to it, because I agree with all the foregoing, I'm just reflecting on life, and I'm saying to get things done. So whenever in history, let's say there were crises, and out of the blue, often an unknown person, he wasn't part of the mix before, or he wasn't that known before, but he stepped into the crisis, and it turned the events, and later on other people might get prominence, but that guy was pivotal, or he led something. So what made people in a time of crisis, first of all, being seen so that people believe them? Because I mean, we've heard the words like trust, honesty, and decisive. So if you were not in the limelight, and you know, I don't know why this coming up in my mind, but way back for us oldies in Poland, when they tried to throw off the communist system, there was a trade union leader that somehow overnight shot into prominence, and at the risk of his own life, just came against the army and the tanks and whatever. and I'm trying to put myself in the mind of some, and that eventually turned over Poland to a democratic nation. So what goes on in the mind of that person, first of all, because everybody else was sick and tired of the oppression. And I think they've already tried everything they could with normal means like media and or whatever you could do under a governmental system like the communistic system. And then comes this guy and all he says, all right, you know what, kill me, but here I am. You don't come through these gates. And then for other people to say, you know what, this guy actually stands for what we all feel. And we might all get killed now. So I don't think, so maybe he wasn't so well spoken. I don't know. I never met the guy. It's just a story comes up in my mind right now. So you need certain kinds of action, but that same action will probably not work in another country under another dispensation. So I think it's almost, yes, in hindsight, we can certainly ascribe certain characteristics like trust and decisiveness and honesty as a given for leaders that you want to follow. But even in decisiveness, I'm thinking of what we're now doing with the chamber and the trade fair. You know, I've served in organizations that for a while they were thriving, but we had a very autocratic leader and he was very immature in himself. And for a while, the team around him made him look very good and he took all the credit for himself. And then there came a point where he was so autocratic that he made stupid decisions and he didn't listen to the clever people around him. He felt threatened by the clever people around him. And what could have been a massive organization spanning international markets is now just, it's still there, but it just ticks over and there's no excitement left because the leader now has got it all, but the good people have left. So it's being decisive when you need to, but also being humble to step back to say, all right, yes, some better clever people who can take this thing forward. So I think leadership is never static. Leadership is always dynamic. Leadership is always read the situation and do what is best for the situation, even if it means shut up, stay quiet, move to the background because things are going well. But at the same time, at the drop of a hat, step in and take over leadership when you see people flounder and they don't know what to do next. So I think that would be my addition to what you guys have already said.
And a great addition it was. Thanks, Jasper. Solomon, are you with us? You look like you were driving just now, but I think you're sitting still at the moment. Can't hear you. No. Try again, Solomon. I thought I heard something there.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yeah.
Okay. So for me, Lee, I just want to nail it by answering your question. I like the question. The question is, what are the expectations that we actually have over our leaders? So I look at South Africa right now, and I look at all the ills, all the challenges, all the things that we actually have. And it becomes very easy for us to really think we actually would like to have an environment where there's direction, there's stability. You know, there's this well-being that all of us are experiencing and enjoying just because of the kind of leadership we have. So it's actually very easy to know what kind of leadership we want. But for me, if I define leadership, I'm taking it from one of the books by John Maxwell, which he says, leadership is influence. So in other words, people like Hitler, he was very influential. but he was a bad leader. He was leading people to the wrong direction. So leadership, its influence, people aspire to be like that person. And where there is no followers, there is no leadership. So when you know that someone is not a leader indeed, you actually see that there is no really followers. But one of the aspects of leadership, it's servanthood. As a leader, are you prepared to get your hands dirty? Are you able to really help others and find out what their needs are? Are you able to disperse and delegate strengths and capabilities among the people that you're trying to influence? So a servant person, they go beyond themselves. They realize very, very quickly what their strengths are, and they start dispersing a lot of the other strengths to everybody else. Another aspect is just the aspect of process, the principle of process, which most of us sometimes we struggle to really apply that principle of process, where we allow ourselves to go through different kinds of things until we are successful. So I think that's that as well. But the other one, which is important, because there's lots of them, it's just a leader is somebody who's always learning. They are 2 steps ahead of everybody else. They are not a know-it-all, but they are learning, and their hearts are really open. And I guess even in our context right now in South Africa, there's so much wealth, wisdom, there's so much input. We just need people that are on the leadership seats, that are listening, that are really opening their ears and applying a lot of things that people are saying. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Solomon. Yeah, again, some really great input there. You know, one of the thoughts that came to my mind as you were talking there about servant leadership and the elements around that was, do you as a leader, and I mean, this is just a general question, but do you as a leader have, as part of your strategic development, a plan to make yourself redundant? Think about that one. Trevor, over to you.
Okay, so how much of the leadership book have you guys left me to work on here? You've covered all the bases, but I think that's something that comes across my head as you're talking is cometh the hour, cometh the woman, as it were, and so us women have to stick together as leaders. But I think that actually says it all for me. Is there are different types of leaders. There are community leaders, there are business leaders, there are leaders in crisis. And when Jasper was talking about what happened with Lech, I think his name was Walesa, in Poland.
Yeah, I think Lech Walesa or something like that.
Something like that, yes. You know what? It took me back to Winston Churchill and the criticisms of Winston Churchill as a man in his private life. But there were elements of the individual that were required to be the right man at the right time to actually combat. And I love the fact that Solomon brought up Hitler as another leader. So, I mean, people follow people that have got charisma, character, and they can be leading their people down the wrong path. There was the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who was a great leader, and he took all the gerbils with him, I think, over the cliff. So leadership, different things in different environments. Someone talked of leaders need followers. Sometimes leaders are all alone when they recognize that the crisis is coming and no one else can actually see it. so you can be a leader without a follower, but you are building up your resource base of information, which makes you so valuable at the time of crisis. So that guy that Lee was talking about in American Express, that actually was put into that position. You can just imagine what was happening around his operation as those Twin Tower centers were actually collapsing. But he had been obviously building everything up to actually make himself the right leader at the right time in the time of that crisis for that particular operation. And I'm sure American Express needed to be operating second by second on a global basis. So I hadn't heard that story. I'm going to go in and I want to read that story. So if you'll put his name and his link, I'm actually going to go back and actually study him. So leadership, what is leadership? I think it is something that you've got to go in and study, and you've got to turn around and say, who are the guys that I admire in history? And let me go and pick up what is it that they actually showed, what characteristic, and go and study their characteristics. And then you'll find out perhaps that, man, these guys had tons of weaknesses. There's not a woman leader that's got a weakness. So I'll talk of the guys who have got weaknesses, and you will find they have very different weaknesses, but there was one particular strength or two particular strengths that were applied in that particular situation that might have saved a nation. And then you've got to turn around and say, well, how do I follow those particular characteristics and make certain that I don't follow the negative characteristics in each of those people? And then I think you'll have a balanced understanding of what leadership is. And if you can pick the top 3 or top 5 or top 10 qualities of what makes a great leader, it'll probably be a little omelet pulled out from other individuals. One other thing that I'm going to leave you with that I've shared across the 90 odd days that we've been going as Wisdoms on this Zoom platform. I believe this, and this is where I'm going to back up on Mpumelelo. Sorry, Mpumelelo. I'm tongue-tied after 3 days of talking like this. But I believe there's one basic principle. Are you looking to do good for society, or are you intent on taking away from society? And by that I mean the guy who jumps over the wall to actually go and take away from someone. I don't care what for, whether they're hungry or whatever. There is no excuse if you are entering into someone else's domain to actually rip them off of who they are or what they're about in society. So society to me means one individual or the 8 billion people in the world. Are you intent on uplifting, doing good, or are you intent on... So I think Hitler was in this frame. Okay, he knew what he was doing. He was going to uplift himself and his people, and he was going to demean a whole sector of the world's population. So it's do good, do bad, do good, do evil, wherever you come from. I better shut up.
No, great. Thanks, Trevor. And I think it's absolutely key, because, we've spoken about role models and the like, and often people in leadership positions are held up as role models and without question. And I think that's the big problem. It's what we try to do here is to get people to think, not just to blindly follow these so-called leaders. And I mean, you picked on it perfectly there, the omelet description of taking the great qualities from different leaders and getting rid of the poor qualities. Because I mean, so often in today's world, we see politicians across the globe using what I call situational ethics and situational morals. So depending on who they're talking to and what they're talking about, their values change completely. There's no consistency in what they say. They're delivering a message to a populace because they want them to follow them based on that message, rather than what is right, as you said. And they may be very good at doing that and very charismatic in the process, and people are following them blindly, unfortunately. And I think we've seen it everywhere. We've seen it here. We've seen it in the UK. We've seen it in America. All over the place. So it's an interesting challenge for me to think, how do we get us as individuals and wider circles around us, people to actually become discerning when they're looking at leaders, when they're looking at leadership, and pick those right elements, as you said, for their own personal leadership, for their own personal development. So, fantastic topic, and I think, yes, but we could go on this one probably for days as well, even though everybody thought it was all set up front. But
yeah, no, I know we have to rush for another meeting, but another thing that comes just up in my mind that we can park somewhere is, for me, the enduring leaders who leave lasting legacies have set around them up an accountability group that keeps them accountable, because we have blind spots that we're not aware of, and then make themselves open for input from that accountability group. So I just wanted to park there.
100%, yes, but I think if you're putting yourself up on a pedestal, you lose connection with that accountability, and it's absolutely key to keep you grounded in terms of your leadership position. So 100% agree with that. Super, thanks. Lee, back over to you to wrap up, and I think then we'll call it a morning.
Yeah, well, I'm going to pick up on what is really, I think, sort of one of the things that we can step into tomorrow is sometimes the power, or most often the power of the leader. I know Jesper spoke about it, it can relate to the context, but sometimes the power of the leader is in the power of their followers. So the followers are the ones who are in actual fact giving them power, and that's no more reality than it is in social media. And so we have this term influencers because they have 50 million followers. They are not more famous than, and I always think about the lady who's got, I don't know, she literally has millions of followers, and what she does is she puts her face into loaves of bread. And I think, you know, it's, so what is it? It's not so much about the leader that I'd like us to focus on tomorrow. It's Ivan's term, discernment of the follower. Is what do we need to be? Yes, we can all be leaders and we can all learn from other leaders, but what power are we giving to others? Because perhaps we're either not discerning or we should be discerning better how to follow. So that's really what I want to ask about tomorrow is, what does it take to be a good follower? And how do we stand up for the leaders that we want rather than the leaders that we've got? So that's really my question tomorrow is, what does it take to be a good follower?
Great, thanks Lee, and thanks everyone. A fantastic morning further. If you can, join us at the trade fair. We're going to be there all day again this morning from 9 o'clock through to our last session starts at 4 p.m. And where we wrap up our inaugural virtual trade fair Africa. So it's been a stunning event so far, and join in if you can. But otherwise, we'll see you in the morning, 8 o'clock. Have a good one. Cheers now.
Thanks everyone. Bye.